Should have listened to my mother is a weekly podcast where we discuss female role models, moms, and we discuss, are you who you are today because of or in spite of that particular woman or women? Well, Dr. Greg Hammer is here to share stories of his maternal grandmother, Kay, and the role she played in his life. In addition, he'll explain his background and intention in writing A Mindful Teen, helping today's teenagers thrive through gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. This book is for parents, caregivers, and first responders. Teens today are definitely struggling with a rise in mental health issues. It's very well known and documented. The good news is that there are many ways to find help, and it's also important that we're speaking more openly with our children about it, right, on a regular basis. Dr. Hammer is a former professor at Stanford University School of Medicine, pediatric intensive care physician, pediatric anesthesiologist, best-selling author, and mindful expert. You're so many things. Dr. Greg Hammer, thanks for joining us on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, just one comment,
Yeah.
and that is that the book, A Mindful Teen, is really geared for those who care for teenagers. So
Okay.
parents, grandparents, teachers, counselors, coaches, social workers, etc., uh,
Caregivers.
therapists, right? Because I don't think that teens are necessarily reading a lot of books. It's
Okay.
really about how to embrace mindfulness as a family and therefore help teens deal with so many of the challenges they face, as you referenced. It's easy to read. Teens can certainly read it. I just don't know how many books like this most teens are
Um,
going to read, given
right.
all the homework and other
Everything
things they have
else.
on their plate, including
Mhm.
way too much social media, which is one of the book chapters.
Yeah. Big, big fat zero in my book for social media, but yeah, here we are. Okay, so Kay, and you and I had a couple of minutes to chat before the official interview started, and I'm already intrigued. Kay is your maternal grandmother, and you mentioned that she had a passion for art.
She did. I was very fortunate, Jackie, that my grandparents on my mother's side lived in the same town where I grew up outside of Chicago. So we spent a lot of time with them. And my grandfather was just the most wonderful grandfather ever. He was full of humor and took things lightly, and so many anecdotes of our experiences with him. My grandmother was a little more serious, but she was very accomplished as an artist, and she and her husband started collecting art at a very young age. So, and they built a very contemporary house when I was young, and it was like a museum. Both the architecture, the landscaping, and the contents of the house certainly. As we were discussing, she had Picasso, Monet, Manet, Modigliani, uh, Calder, are so many things
Yeah.
that were mostly pretty modern, and so that was a huge influence on me. I'm fortunate to have a lot of artists in the family, and I think art, like music, is so important and so vital.
Were you running around their house with all these original paintings on their walls like
Well,
crazy
we had
kids?
there were some
As
rules
kids
in
do.
their house, like I remember one piece of art, if you will, they had in their den where we spent a lot of time, and there was that little bowl of M&Ms that was always refreshed and a target. But there was also an old antique African drum, and of course, as kids, we always wanted to take the drumsticks and pound on it, and that was sort of not to be encouraged, but we were also not encouraged to touch everything on the walls and so on. It wasn't difficult, actually. It was wonderful to be exposed to that kind of art at such a young age.
Yeah.
And I would sometimes go to the museum with my grandmother, and she was a very interesting person. She, before she married my grandfather, she traveled around Europe, and this was back in the early 20s. My grandmother did some unusual things. She smoked cigarettes and she traveled around Europe. She spent time in France. She spoke French. She was a very elegant woman.
Did she grow up in the Midwest?
She did. She actually grew up in the same town where they lived and where we lived in a town called Highland Park, Illinois.
So did she drink wine or scotch? What kind of?
Scotch.
Yes, a
Wine
woman
with
after my own
dinner,
heart.
good
Wine
French
with
wine
dinner.
with dinner, and in the den where we hung out, we often went for happy hour. So scotch was sort of the drink that she and my grandfather enjoyed, and as well as my mother. Um, so it was always very good scotch.
Do you
And
remember? Do you remember what she used to drink?
uh, she used to drink, well, they drank sort of a special edition of Jack Daniels.
Mm-hmm. Bourbon.
And there was a bar in the den. I remember that. And it just, all of it just seemed so elegant and aristocratic, even though my
Yeah.
grandfather was extremely informal and a real jokester. So the dynamic between the two of them was always very interesting. My grandmother was trying to kind of keep a lid on his humor, but he would sort of give us a wink and a nod and do something funny shortly thereafter. So it was quite an interesting relationship.
Hmm.
To which to be exposed as a young person.
Yeah, but
So they're
that's
home
good
and
to
they're, yes,
have those different personalities coming together, right? Because she probably was laughing on the inside, but didn't want to live on the outside. Either that or drove her crazy, but it's good. It's all
yes,
good.
she would admonish him lightly out loud, but I think on the inside she must have been laughing at some of the stuff he did.
Yeah. So how much was your grandmother, Kay, involved in your upbringing as far as the day-to-day things and instilling in you? Would she sit and have intellectual conversations with you or talk about your interests? Did she encourage you to be an artist?
She wasn't that involved in day-to-day things. I would say that my time with her was largely spent at her home, where we would go for happy hour dinners, of course, holidays. And she was, as I've said, an aristocrat. And she had some family money. Her grandparents came to the United States uh, from Germany and started a women's undergarment business, believe it or not.
Good.
And that was
We
later
need
sold.
that.
That was sold to a company called Marshall Field. So she grew up kind of in an aristocratic manner, and that was kind of her MO, I would say. So she wasn't really involved in our day-to-day that much. I think she was involved primarily when we spent time at her home or another family member's home for holidays. And she did speak about her time in France, for example. She was a very astute student of history and art history. So when I got to be of a certain age, I would ask her about the art that she had hanging on her walls and so on. And it was always a very interesting discussion. She was also a stickler for linguistics. So she would often correct us when we used an erroneous
You
word.
wait.
And that's funny because that did actually have an influence on me when I was a fellow at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia years later. One of my mentors was similarly inclined, and so between my grandmother and Russ Rafferty, I became also very interested in linguistics and speaking correctly. Um, Including a lot of not ending a sentence with a preposition, et cetera, things that have sort of become part of the way we speak, even the talking heads on television. So my grandmother would have been appalled. For example, data is a plural word. So those
Interesting.
are the data, not this is the data. This is the datum would be the correct. So my grandmother,
Wow.
and I think this is sort of an insight into her personality. She would typically correct us if we used the wrong tense or form. And that had an influence on me. So years later, between she and my influence as a fellow, in my practice, when I would make rounds in the intensive care unit and the students, residents, and fellows would make up words or combine words and really use too many adverbs even, I would sort of jokingly correct them. So the fellows would be very in tune with that, and they would prep the residents and the medical students before I came on service. Dr. Hammer's on next week. Please don't do this or that or speak in this way, etc. So it's kind of interesting. So that was one influence my grandmother had on me.
So you carry that with you, or you still have those memories today, which is really wonderful.
Yeah,
Was
absolutely.
was she born in the US or was
She
she
was
born
born in the
overseas?
US and her parents were born in the US. It was her grandparents that immigrated.
Okay. So did she ever study abroad? Because
She
oftentimes,
did.
oh,
She
okay.
studied at the Sorbonne, in fact. And, at that time, I think it was quite unusual for an American woman to spend time in Europe the way she did. I think she was a bit of a trailblazer. And it's interesting, just kind of the imagery of her home, the home they built, was very much ahead of its time. And today, it still looks very contemporary. And so I think that sort of typifies her persona in a way, because she always very contemporary and elegant.
When you first mentioned the style of the home, Frank Lloyd Wright came to mind, but or something intermingled with the environment and clean lines and I can see the art and in my
Absolutely. In
mind.
fact, the home that her home was very Frank Lloyd Wright like. There were a lot of floor to ceiling windows. I prefer it to a Frank Lloyd Wright home because the Frank Lloyd Wright homes that I've seen, which are typical of his architectural work, have dark rooms. Like, for example, the kitchens may be very dark and not have any windows to the outside. And the homes on the outside are just stunning. Frank
Yeah.
Lloyd Wright, that is. So her home is like that architecturally, except that I think it's, and even for me, more attractive because it had a lot more light. All the rooms had windows. The windows along the back side of the house overlooked a beautifully landscaped area
Oh,
with
yay.
Japanese rock garden and ravine. And it's just such a beautiful place. My house is designed by a guy named Eichler. I don't know if you have Eichler homes where you are, but there are a
Not
lot of them in
familiar.
California, and there are
Mhm.
some further east, and very similar to her home. Very indoor, outdoor, lots of windows, but fortunately enough wall space for me to hang lots of art.
Yay, that's so calming and peaceful to me to have beautiful art. I need that's very important. Art, music, family, good food,
You got
and
it,
spirituality
and
and
you got
exercise.
it, and physical well-being as well on top of
Yeah,
it.
absolutely, absolutely. Do you know if their home is still intact?
It is intact on the outside. The last time I saw it, I ran into the owners and they invited me in. They had done some remodeling on the inside.
Mhm.
Uh, so the inside is different, but the outside is the same, and the landscaping and so on are very much in keeping
That's a
with my grandparents' taste.
that's a tribute to them.
It is.
That's really heartwarming, and I haven't gone back to my childhood home. I mean, we drive by it if we're in the neighborhood, but I have no interest in going inside. I know
Well,
exactly what I want to remember.
yeah, no, the home where we lived, where I grew up with my two siblings, was not special at all. It was a very small little house. Um, and I would have no interest in going inside
Going back.
there in particular, but my grandparents' house was something special.
Where are you in the line of your siblings?
I'm in the middle. I have a brother. My brother and I are the only two scientists in the family, going way back as far as we can do. My brother's a molecular biologist, and I'm a physician and researcher. And my sister, who's an artist, like my mother's sister, my grandmother, and several other people in the family, uh, is 3 years younger than I am. So we're 4 years spread, and I'm in the middle.
where did you and your brother come from? There seems to be at the other side of the brain working a little bit more than.
Yeah, I would actually attribute some of what, our path to my father more so than my mother. My father
Interesting.
was always drumming in the importance of education.
Yeah.
And, he loved, I was a student of astronomy for quite a while, had telescopes and so on. And when I was in university, I sort of minored in astrophysics. And my father was so interested in what I was doing. Um, I think it helped propel me. And I finally decided that, the human body and the universe have so much in common on different scales, kind of fractal. And so I decided to go into medicine because it's basically the interrelationship between all things, nano, micro, and macro. And the human body is such a remarkable thing. It's in a way kind of analogous to the universe and the way uh, things relate to one another on a quantum level and also on a Newtonian, very large scale level.
Wow. I didn't technically understand all of it, but I felt
Sorry.
I felt every ounce of it because our bodies are so special and they're precious, and we really have to take care of them, even though we might be, in our teens or 20s. It all kind of catches up after a couple of decades. So yeah, our
No, in
minds are
fact, one of my
healthy.
current passions is longevity science. So
Uh-huh.
I talk a lot about that. If you go online and you Google my name, you'll see a lot of wonderful material, I hope, on that has to do with longevity science. So on my Instagram, for example, there's a lot of short videos talking about topics related to aging and aging well. And of course, when you get to be over a certain age, it's a especially important thing to look into.
Yes, indeed.
There's so much we can do, really. We have a lot more control over the aging process than we were led to believe. Everybody thinks that genetics is sort of everything, and it's really only about 25%. Uh,
Is
the
that it?
overall.
You can science can it's only well, I got really lucky with my genes. I really did. I'm the youngest of seven, so um, there's definitely stuff going on, but we got very lucky with our genes.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. So speaking of our taking care of our bodies, we have to take care of our minds as well. And it's particularly tough for teenagers now. And schools are making strides with, eliminating cell phones during school time. But COVID obviously plays a big part in all of this unhealthy, not wellness. That's not correct English, but so it's. I don't think we can stop it cold turkey, but we certainly, by talking about it, it's the first step forward. So why don't you share with my audience um, the acronym of gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment.
Sure. It's so interesting that we can change the way we think. We can actually change the architecture and function of our brains through practice, just as we can change the nature of our bodies through exercise,
Mhm,
sleep,
I agree.
nutrition. And so we have this wonderful quality called neuroplasticity, which means that sort of our thoughts beget our thoughts. And if we focus on certain things, we actually end up thinking about those things and in those ways even more and more over time. But we have to have a plan. And that's actually the ion gain is intention. We have to have intention, just like staying in good physical shape. We have to have the intention to exercise. Otherwise, if we just go to our default mode, we just are just as happy sitting around most of the time. So the GAIN acronym stands for gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. And my sort of thesis in a nutshell is that we have two ways our brains are wired that interfere with our ability to be as happy as we can be. And they are one, we have a negativity bias. We tend to remember the negative thoughts and experiences. in our lives and forget the positive ones. I think we can all relate to that. As I look back on my career in medicine, I remember the things that went wrong much more than the things that went well.
Now, why? Why? Because we spend more time in that track.
I
My
think
mom
it's
was, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, because she knew you have to switch. You have to
right.
really work at switching your thought pattern and those synapses. And whether it's music, music is a huge benefit for me. That's what really can just switch it, man.
Yeah, and
And
especially if you
all of
can
a
move your
sudden
body
you
to it.
forget. Yeah. And then
Yeah,
I start using my body because I'm dancing, and then my energy level comes up, and it's pretty cool.
absolutely. Well, our brains evolved for survival, not for happiness. There's no real survival benefit to happiness. So if you think about it, go back 150, 200,000 years and imagine our forebears sitting around a cave trying to keep the fire going, keep their family safe. And there
Fed.
could be a saber-toothed tiger lurking outside the mouth of the cave. And if I were the sort of male figure in the family, the dad, it would behoove me to be worried about the possibility that a saber-toothed tiger was lurking outside the mouth of the cave. So the more wary and sort of thinking about the future and the worst thing that could happen I was, the more I would protect my family against that possibility and the more offspring I might have. And so these genes and epigenetic factors that code for qualities that reside in the brain, like wariness and negativity and catastrophizing, those kind of became propagated throughout the population. And here we are today with those traits, and they don't serve us well necessarily. I mean, at times it's an advantage to be wary, and you find yourself in a strange, potentially dangerous circumstance. It's good to be aware of what might happen and guard against it. But for most of the time, for most of us, we live in a safe area. We have a roof over our head. We have food to eat. We don't have to worry about are we going to survive another day. And
Right.
so this negativity, this wariness, combined with the second feature of the way our brains are wired, which is having a hard time being present. So we tend to ruminate over the past and overthink it and worry too much and overthink the future. And when you combine these sort of obsessions with the past and future with our negativity bias, you get regret, shame, negative self-judgment when we think about the past. And when we overthink the future, you get a lot of fear and anxiety. And those are, the most common mental health conditions we deal
We
with.
have no control of our past, and well, we have some control of our past, but we have no control of what happens in the future. So all that worrying is worthless because it's not going to change anything. And yet we
Mhm.
still worry.
Right. I think that, like thinking about the past and future are adaptive to a certain extent. Like we want to learn from our mistakes. So when
Yes.
things don't go well, we do want to think about why they didn't go well, for example. And we want to savor our precious memories. So in those ways, thinking about the past is adaptive. And with regard to the future, I had to plan carving out a little time so we could have a chat today, Jackie.
That's
And
really difficult and stressful.
we have to put, bread on the table and so on. So we do have to plan things
Absolutely.
to some degree, but we
Yes.
overdo it. So having a mindfulness practice can help us be more present-minded and more positive. In fact, one of my heroes, John Kabat-Zinn, defined mindfulness as experiencing the present moment on purpose without judgment. And the on purpose is the intention, and the on without judgment is the end and gain non-judgment. So it turns out by actually thinking thoughts of gratitude, thinking thoughts of acceptance, meaning as we do our brief gain meditation with slow, deep, deliberate breathing, sitting in a comfortable chair, for example, with our eyes closed in the morning, when we get to acceptance, we may think of an uncomfortable or painful experience and actually imagine bringing it into our chest, into our heart, and nurturing it and sitting with it and relaxing our muscles as we do so and continuing our slow, deep, deliberate breathing.
Right.
And we learn to accept things that we can't change that don't agree with us.
Yeah.
And then the I in gain is intention, and the N, of course, as we've said, is non-judgment. And I use tools to teach people how to let go of judgment because things don't have to be good or bad. So if you are doing your slow, deep, deliberate breathing and you picture an image of the Earth apparently suspended in space, one of these beautiful NASA images, you can think about that the Earth is neither good nor bad. It's a lovely planet, but it doesn't really have the qualities of goodness or badness. And therefore, it makes sense for me too to think of myself in the same way. I'm not intrinsically good or bad. I'm just the person that I am. And we can
Well,
kind
I
of,
never thought of it that way.
so this can actually change the way we think almost instantly. And so we do this brief 3 to 4 minute practice in the morning, and it reinforces a way of thinking that we can refer to during the day. So we do our gain meditation, have our cup of coffee, get in our car to drive to work. Somebody cuts us off. We start to make all these negative judgments. A light bulb goes off. I just
Yes.
sat with non-judgment. Let me drop that judgment. And we get a little dopamine hit instead of an adrenaline hit. And this is something that happens just beginning the first time we do this, we embrace this practice.
Right, but and it's like you said, it's driving in your car, and then you get to work, and someone says something or greets you the wrong way. It's a perpetual readjustment, right? I
That's
have a
right.
couple of friends that are teachers, and I was wondering if teachers, and there's the whole. Well, I'm not going to get into that, but I'm curious if this is something that teachers could begin their classes with.
Exactly. Teachers,
And I
parents.
don't want to bring up I went to parochial school and we had our prayers and all that stuff that we had to do. But in public school, is mindfulness and meditation to begin each class, just so kids kind of get a chance to adjust. Going from one class to the other, do you know how stressful that can be for so many kids between the bullying and prep for a test that you're not ready for, seeing a teacher who is mad at you, or you took some, the stress just within the 3 or 4 minutes, however that your walk is, long your walk is from class to class, that alone, in addition to everything else in life, if they were able to take a couple of minutes when they sat down and
Absolutely. Well, that's what the
let's
book is
do it.
about. That's what a mindful teen is
Let's
about. And it
make it
is written
happen.
for teachers, among others, and families too. So when we sit down to have dinner together, make sure our smartphones are silenced and
Out.
not on the
Yeah.
table and not to be taken off the table or what have you, not to be utilized. And spend 1 minute talking about that for which we're grateful. I mean, many people do, in fact, do a little gratitude prayer before they eat, but do it out loud with the family. And because our natural tendency is to kind of complain. So, how was your day? Well, this, that, instead of focusing on things that went well. And the
Yeah.
more we focus on things that went well, and this is one example, mealtime, it's important to have dinner with the family all at once, if at all possible, and eliminate the smartphones and just go around the table just saying what we're grateful for, because most of us have much for which to be grateful. Even just running water, hot water, the ability to take a shower when you want, having a roof over your head, having food on the table, having each other. So, yes, absolutely. Spend 30 seconds or 60 seconds talking about gratitude. And the same for teachers, coaches, counselors, etc.
Yeah. Is there is there sentences or phrases that we should not use when approaching this subject with teens? How you feeling? I mean, some are like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like that would drive me nuts as a teen.
Yes. It's funny because I'm also an anesthesiologist
Hmm.
and a pediatric anesthesiologist, as you mentioned. And when you have a child who's unhappy and crying and, you have to put an IV in or whatever, this has actually been studied. Like, what are the right words to say to soothe the child? And what, in fact, is counterproductive is saying, it's okay. It's okay. Because it's not okay. You're going
It's
to do
not
something that
okay.
hurts. And so there's other ways to approach that. And so, no, I think just stay positive and, check in with your teen and, make sure you're really listening and embody these game principles with your teen. You're driving in the car, you're taking them to a after school activity, a sporting event or whatever. Check in with them, and that may include some things that are uncomfortable to talk about, like sex, sexual activity, sexually transmitted diseases, things that your teen is sad about or unhappy about.
Or doesn't know anything about. And yet the
True.
peer pressure is ridiculous. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
I'm glad I got to run around outside and know when to come home for dinner.
And there wasn't, gun violence, the
Oh gosh,
political
yeah.
divide that we have that's breaking families and friends apart. Eco anxiety is a thing. Is there going to be a planet for my children to inhabit or my grandchildren? So many things that we did not have to deal with. On top of the fact that I do think that college admission is getting more and more competitive, and I think it's at an all-time high. My partner has an 18-year-old daughter,
It's
and
ridiculous.
I'm kind of aware of, she's a freshman in college now, but I'm aware of, all the trials and travails her friends went through. And so you have these kids who have straight A's or nearly straight A's and extracurricular activities, and they're going to be great students in college, and they're going to do the college, uh, a good thing. And maybe they got into one safety school. So
It's
there's a
really
huge amount of
hard.
anxiety about getting into college. So all these things combined, I think that having a mindfulness practice as a family has never been more important.
Yeah. Wonderful conversation. And I'm hoping that maybe we can do this again. Okay. Your next book comes out. And I'm so thankful that you shared these wonderful stories about Kay. What a remarkable woman. And now when I go to the Art Institute in Chicago, I will think of her.
Absolutely. Go, especially the wonderful modern art wing they have. It's lovely.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely wonderful. Dr. Greg Hammer, I so appreciate you joining us on this episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Truly my pleasure, Jackie.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.